The rain fell hard that evening, turning the military base's dusty ground into thick mud. Lieutenant Sarah Chun knelt in the dirt, her hands trembling as she tried to gather the scattered medical supplies from her overturned bag. Blood trickled from her temple where Captain Marcus Drake's boot had connected moments earlier. The other soldiers stood frozen, their eyes wide with horror, but no one dared to move. Drake was known for his cruelty, his abuse of power, and his complete disregard for anyone he considered beneath him. What happened next would change everything, and if you think you know where this story is going, I promise you don't. Stay with me because the truth behind this moment will shake you to your core. Sarah had been at the base for only 3 months, transferred from a field hospital where she had saved dozens of lives under enemy fire. She was quiet, humble, and never spoke about her past. The soldiers loved her because she treated everyone with dignity, stitching wounds and offering kind words when the weight of war became too heavy. But Drake saw her kindness as weakness, her silence as submission. Earlier that day, Drake had ordered Sarah to falsify medical records to cover up his negligence. A young private under his command had been injured during an unauthorized training exercise Drake had orchestrated to impress visiting officials. The injury was severe, and Drake wanted it recorded as an accident during approved drills. Sarah had refused. Her voice had been steady when she told him that integrity wasn't negotiable, that lives weren't pawns in his career game. His face had turned red with rage, veins bulging at his temples. He had grabbed her by the collar and dragged her outside in front of the entire unit, screaming that she would learn her place. The kick came without warning. One moment she was standing, trying to maintain her composure, and the next she was on the ground, her vision blurring, the metallic taste of blood filling her mouth. Drake stood over her, his shadow blocking the dim evening light. His voice dripping with venom as he told her that disobedience had consequences. The soldiers watching felt their stomachs turn, but fear kept them silent. Drake had destroyed careers before, and everyone knew crossing him meant the end of everything they had worked for. But what none of them knew, what Drake couldn't have possibly known, was who Sarah really was. She had never told anyone. She had asked for the transfer under a common name, wanting to serve without the burden of expectations, without the weight of a legacy that felt too heavy to carry. Her father had been Admiral James Chun, a decorated war hero who had died saving his entire battalion during an overseas operation. Her grandfather had been General William Chun, a legend in military history whose strategies were still taught at every academy. And her uncle, General Robert Chun, currently served as one of the highest-ranking officials in the entire armed forces. Sarah had grown up watching her father's sacrifice destroy her mother, watching her grandfather's fame turn into a prison of expectations. She had joined the military not for glory but for purpose, and she had deliberately hidden her identity to earn respect through her actions, not her name. She wanted to be judged by her character, not her bloodline. As she knelt there in the mud, she thought about calling her uncle, about using her connections to end Drake's tyranny, but something in her resisted. She had promised herself she would make it on her own. Then the helicopters arrived. 3 of them, their rotors slicing through the rain-heavy air, landing with such force that everyone had to shield their eyes from the debris. The doors opened and out stepped 3 generals, their uniforms pristine despite the weather, their faces carved from stone. General Robert Chun was in the center, flanked by 2 other high-ranking officials. The entire base fell into stunned silence. Drake's face went pale, the color draining so quickly he looked like he might collapse. What Drake didn't know was that the young private he had injured was the nephew of a senator, and that senator had made calls. What he didn't know was that several soldiers had secretly reported his abuses, and an investigation had been underway for weeks. And what he absolutely didn't know was that one of those generals was Sarah's uncle, who had been monitoring her service from afar, respecting her wish for anonymity, but ready to intervene if she was ever in real danger. General Chun walked directly to Sarah, helping her to her feet with a gentleness that contradicted his intimidating presence. He looked at Drake with eyes that could cut through steel and said quietly that the unit was hereby shut down, that Drake was under arrest for assault, abuse of power, and falsification of records. and that every soldier present would be reassigned and protected from retaliation. Drake tried to speak to defend himself, but the words died in his throat when he saw the insignia on the general's uniforms. In the days that followed, Sarah's identity became known, but by then it didn't matter. The soldiers respected her not because of her name, but because she had stood up for what was right when it cost her everything. Drake faced court-martial and lost everything he had built through intimidation and cruelty. The young private recovered fully, and his family ensured that the military took abuse seriously going forward. Sarah continued her service, but now she did so openly, carrying both her own integrity and her family's legacy with pride. She learned that sometimes strength isn't about suffering in silence, but about knowing when to accept help, when to let others stand beside you in the fight for justice. Her father had taught her about sacrifice, her grandfather about strategy, but that rainy evening taught her about the power of truth and the importance of never compromising your values, even when the cost seems unbearable. Years later, when she became a general herself, she would tell young soldiers about that day, about the moment she chose principle over silence, and how that choice changed not just her life but the entire culture of accountability in their ranks. Because sometimes one act of courage, one refusal to accept injustice, can create waves that reach far beyond what we can imagine. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that standing up for what's right matters even when it's terrifying, share it with someone who needs to hear it today.